Welcome to our online Sunday experience and our September teaching series, How to Church, Healing the Sick, Raising the Dead, and Loving Thy Neighborhood. It's a practical 3-week series about how to follow Jesus together during a worldwide pandemic. The message you're about to watch was recorded live, and we hope that it will inspire you to join God in the renewal of all things.
All right, well, we are in the third week of a teaching series called How to Church, Healing the Sick, Raising the Dead, and Loving Thy Neighborhood. So over the past few weeks, we've been kind of getting some of our regular church rhythms back in motion. We're back. We're gathering together for our worship services. We're back getting our rhythms in motion for Lakeview Kids and Lakeview Youth. We're back getting together for home church. But as we all know, even though we're getting some of our regular rhythms back in motion, it's like nothing we've ever done before. And so while we're figuring out some new ways to exist as a church, we thought it would be helpful to look back and maybe rediscover some of the basic elements of what it means to be the church. It feels different, but the vision and mission of the church has flexed and adapted and responded to all kinds of challenges and all kinds of cultural realities and all kinds of crises over the past 2,000 years, and I'm pretty confident that the church will prevail in these times as well. So we're looking back. We're looking back to when Jesus first sent out his followers to go on and carry on his mission into the world. And we look back in order to help us as we look forward. And if you're joining us for the first time in this series, maybe I'll help us all just kind of retrace our steps with where we've been in this series so far. So back in Matthew chapter 9, we are told, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. That's awesome. That's Jesus. That's what he does, proclaiming good news and healing people. But then Jesus, he recognizes that the need is so great, and there are so many people who need to encounter the good news of the kingdom. So he rallies up his disciples, the original 12, and he sends them out with his authority. And this is what he says: as you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick. Raise the dead. See, Jesus sends out his followers to carry forward his mission. He's saying to them, you've watched me. I've shown you how it's done. I send you out with my authority. And friends, this is the core thrust of the church. We are carrying forward the mission of Jesus to proclaim good news and to bring healing to the world. And so over the past few weeks, we've been exploring some of the ways that Jesus taught his followers to do this, right? He told his followers that as they go, travel light. Trust that God's going to take care of you and your provisions. You're going to join together with people who you wouldn't maybe normally hang out with out in the world, but something weird about the church brings all of us Johnnies together. Remember that? And we discover community with people we don't necessarily like all the time. And that's okay. And we also recognize that as we do this for the long haul. We're focused on the long-term vision, and we're building new muscle memory. We're learning new ways to exist and respond like Jesus would in the world. And so that's where we've been so far, which now brings us into today's passage. Matthew 10 goes like this, verse 26. Do not be afraid of those who threaten you, for there's nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. This is what I like about Jesus. This is how he does things. He's rallying his crew together, and he's sending them out and getting them kind of hyped up for this important mission. But he also wants to be very clear that as he sends them out, he wants to be honest and say, you're going to face obstacles. And we've actually already seen this show up throughout Matthew 10. Jesus has already told his followers, don't be surprised when people hate you. Don't be shocked if people mistreat you, right? He doesn't hold anything back. He wants his followers to understand that there's going to be opposition. They will face challenges. But one thing he also wants them to hear clearly is this, is not to be afraid. Understand what you're going to face, but don't let that slow you down. You see, Jesus, he faced opposition, and he's making sure that we know that as his followers, we will too. The question is, how do we navigate that? What do we do when we come up against opposition as we're trying to bring forth the good news of the kingdom? Well, first off, in my experience, the first opposition we face, it's not likely going to be verbal, like hatred or rejection. The first opposition that we will face will be a collision of values. Because you see, if we're going out into the world, if we are committing ourselves to follow the ways of Jesus, trusting that his ways are good, we are going to come up against a whole bunch of people who don't trust the ways of Jesus, who don't believe his ways are good. And what's that going to look like? Well, it's going to mean that we're going to be bumping up against people who are rude, who are ignorant, who are selfish, who are deceitful, who are angry. And if we are truly committed to surrendering ourselves to the ways of Jesus, which means we're opening ourselves up for the Spirit to transform us and remake us into the likeness of Jesus, and if we are seeking to be people in this world who are generous, kind, humble, patient, selfless, it's going to be a collision. But what happens in those moments? What do we do? How do we respond? Do we fight? Do we put those people in their place? Do we judge? Do we withdraw? Are we afraid? Do we feel afraid that we're going to get hurt? Afraid that we're going to be taken advantage of? Afraid that we're going to miss out if we don't stand up for ourselves? See, Jesus speaks right into that collision when he says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of those who threaten you. Don't be afraid of those who you think are getting some sort of advantage or those who you think are setting you back. Remember who's ultimately in control. And remember your value. Remember who you truly are. And remember who you belong to. Also, remember, you're not so different from those people you're bumping up against. Am I right? You and I, we need Jesus. We need to be reshaped into the likeness of Jesus as much as anybody else in this world. So this is not a collision of good people and bad people. This is a collision of kingdoms. This is a collision of the way people see the world, and we need to recognize that, hey, we are having our moments just like anybody else is. Am I right? But Jesus encourages us to see those collisions for what they truly are. We are bringing forth the kingdom, and we should not be surprised when it grinds up against the ways of the world. And we should not feel rattled or scared, but we are secure. We know our value. We know where our worth comes from. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about one example where I felt like this showed up in my own life a while back, a number of years ago, when I was Tara and I were first newly married. And we were living in a basement suite in Sutherland. And we rented the basement, and somebody else rented the upstairs. We'll call this person Lucille, because that was her name. And And so, whatever, we got along fine with Lucille. There's no real beef that we were aware of. But one night, middle of the night, I'm out asleep. All of a sudden, I get this elbow, and it's Tara's like, "Yeah, Kurt, it's 3 a.m, and they are just cranking music upstairs." I'm like, all right, I know what I got to do, right? So put on the jacket, it's middle of winter. Put on the jacket, got to go outside and around to the front and knock on the door and be kind of humble and trying to just not cause a thing. Just be like, hey, remember us? We live downstairs. We're trying to sleep. If you don't mind, if you could turn the music down, we just really appreciate it. That'd be nice. And Lucille's kind of yeah, sure, fine, whatever. So I go back downstairs, go to sleep. I'm out again. A half hour later, get another elbow. Tara's like, Kurt, they didn't turn the music off. You can sleep through this. I cannot. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. So again, I'm feeling a bunch of things, but whatever. I go up there. I'm just trying to not start a thing. I don't want to start a thing. So I just knock on the door. I'm like, hey, please, please. We're just trying to sleep. My wife has to wake up early and go to work. Could you please, it's 4 a.m. Could you turn the music off? And it was at this moment where the conversation kind of tilted. And all of a sudden, I felt like Lucille started kind of belittling me, and she's talking to me, being you're just a kid. You shouldn't even be married. I'm like, whoa, hey, hold on. I'm 22. I'm kind of chest hairs coming in eventually. I'm a man. What is this about? But she's just rude and just ignorant and just being basically leave me alone. So I'm feeling a whole mixture of things, obviously, but I go downstairs and I sleep it off. And I wake up the next morning, and it snowed, and so I'm shoveling my sidewalk and my part of the driveway, and I'm just kind of doing a thing. And as I'm shoveling, I'm just you know what? I'm just gonna shovel Lucille's driveway. I'm gonna shovel her walkway. I'm gonna shovel her steps. And I wasn't I'll show her. It was just it was this honest sense of this is what Jesus tells me to do. I'm called to love my neighbor. And I don't think it's predicated on how they treat me. I'm just called to love my neighbor. And I actually remember feeling even just a sense of compassion towards Lucille. Just recognizing that can't be fun, really, treating people that way. That's not a good way to treat people. And she's gonna probably feel embarrassed when she sees me the next day. It's just, that's not a good way to do things. And I felt almost a bit of sadness that I don't know. I didn't know her whole story. I didn't know what else had gone on in her life, but I knew that there was a better way for her to exist, and she was probably even feeling that herself. But the other thing is that I remember feeling secure in that experience. She didn't have the power to tell me who I am or how valuable or worthy I am. This is what we can stand in and we can experience when we come up against opposition in our lives. Now, I don't always handle every situation that way, but this is one situation where I can feel that's how I want to exist more and more in this world. You see, if we're bringing forth the kingdom, it's going to collide with the ways other people live. And we cannot let that discourage us. We can't let that slow us down. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, is that what it means to proclaim the good news of the kingdom? Is that all we really need to do, is just be good neighbors to other people? I do believe that being a good neighbor is the beginning of what it means to bring forth good news to the world, but I don't believe it ends there. You see, Jesus has called us to proclaim, to share truth, to tell his story, as we like to say here at Lakeview. And in my experience, once we've established a sense of good news in the way that we live and exist among other people, the best opportunities to actually proclaim good news is when it's invited, when people are curious, when people have asked us about our faith and asked us about what we think of the world, and when we've earned a place of trust to speak into someone else's life. Now, some of you might be thinking, the anxiety level is rising. I don't know what to say in those moments. I don't have all the answers. I don't know how to explain all the things of God. But that's not what Jesus is asking of us. Did you see in this passage, what he said when he told his disciples as he's sending them out? He says, what is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. I love that image. I believe what Jesus is saying is you don't need to answer every question or have some sort of grandiose proclamation ready to go. But Jesus is simply calling us to share what we understand to be true about his kingdom. Every night I tuck my kids into bed, and when I do, I like to whisper something in their ear, just something like Jesus, or sorry, I do say that too about Jesus, but I also like to say, Daddy loves you very, very much. And you know, there's a lot more to our relationship than that, but if that's all that my kids really grasp, if that's all that sinks deep in their hearts, then I'm good. So what is deep in your heart when it comes to Jesus? In your own words, how would you describe the goodness of who Jesus is and what he's doing in the world? Because I think that's a really good place to start when we think about proclaiming the goodness of the kingdom to the world. And I've had the opportunity to share this with some of my friends. I've had the opportunity sometimes on an airplane. Somehow they're curious and they'd like to know about my life, and I've shared about my faith with people, perfect strangers. One time I shared with someone who I was sharing a hospital bed with. I wasn't sharing a bed, sharing a hospital room with. I was in there for a knee surgery, and we got talking, and I was able to answer questions. And I find whenever anybody asks me these kind of questions that I say almost the exact same thing every time. I just simply say, I believe that Jesus wants us all to discover the life that we were made for. Like, I believe that Jesus wants to help us reconnect with our Creator, that there's a way that we were meant to live. And I've personally found in my own experience that ever since I've been following Jesus, it just feels like he's leading me into life, I guess it's meant to be. And like, that's not something I sat down and scripted or some sort of sales pitch I put together. That is just what I believe God has whispered in my ear over time. And I just love it when I have the chance to share that with other people. And the message, it's not always well received, and it might not be in your experience as well. At times, we might find ourselves colliding with other people. But that's okay, because we're secure. We know our worth. We know we are God's. And we're just going to keep on going. We're going to keep on proclaiming the good news of the kingdom with our actions and our words. Because that's how to church. But it's not all. Jesus continues. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Anybody else feeling a little bit like, hey, Jesus, just chill a little bit? Like, like this. These are the parts, if I'm honest, of the Bible where I just tend to slide on by. Like, I'm just going to just keep reading and get to something else, because this is uncomfortable. Am I the only one feeling this? Like, what is going on here, right? Like, he's talking about disowning his followers while bringing a sword, fights between mothers-in-laws and daughters-in-laws. Like, oh my goodness, could you imagine? I won't say anymore. But what is happening in this passage? See, again, Jesus wants to be clear about everything that comes when we align ourselves with him. He doesn't want anyone getting involved or invested without fully grasping what they're in for. He's already warned them that there's going to be opposition when they go out into the world. And he's also wanting them to understand that there might be friction a little bit closer to home, among their communities, within their families, even within their own hearts. He's warning his followers that this is going to be risky business. And see, Jesus knows that as they carry forth the message of the kingdom, it's going to be divisive. It's going to ruffle feathers. It's going to reveal fault lines in families. And Jesus is also being very honest that his kingdom calls for complete allegiance. Surrendering to Jesus as Lord is no joke. And it's going to raise tension internally for some of his followers who are going to feel the pull of like competing commitments. And Jesus doesn't try to hide this. He puts it on the table and he says that we must grapple with the implications. Because sometimes it gets messy when the kingdom collides with the ways of the world. And some of you in the room like know exactly what this feels like. Some of you have felt belittled and rejected by other people because of your faith. Others, you've maybe felt excluded or mistreated. For others, maybe you haven't felt others like turn against you, but you felt like your faith has just caused a sense of tension in relationships. Like there's just a little bit more conflict in the air because of your commitment to Jesus. I've felt this before. I've never experienced anybody like directly mistreat me because of my faith in Jesus, but I felt the ways that my allegiance with Jesus caused tension within my own family. Many of you know my sister Nicole. She's a part of our church. She's one of our most like faithful youth leaders, and she lives in my home with me and my family. We're very close, but it wasn't always that way. I remember back when I first started taking my commitment to Jesus seriously, there was some tension in the air between us. Now, like my sister never judged me, never mistreated me, never like rejected me, but I know it was hard that we just didn't see the world the same way. It was hard for her and it was hard for me. And I struggled. I struggled in my heart because like I was wondering like what did it mean? How did I do this well? How could I remain committed to my family and fully committed to Jesus? And it felt like there was some tension there. And I remember one time in particular, we were on like a long drive together. We were going to Alberta to visit family. Just the two of us were in the car. And it felt like the first time that we just faced into the gap that we both knew existed between us. And I remember feeling so scared. Just scared that I would say something offensive. Or scared that I would make her feel like I didn't care about her. Or that I didn't love her. Scared that I would come across like I'm smarter than her, or like I felt like I was better than her in some way. Like I was scared at the potential that my faith had to do damage in my relationships and my family. And I think this is the heart of what Jesus is trying to press into. There's a risk involved with our commitment to Jesus. There's a chance that other people won't respond well. A chance that others might reject us. A chance that others will want to distance themselves from us. There's a risk that our commitment to Jesus will cost us something. And Jesus doesn't want to hide that. He doesn't even want to downplay that. He wants us to face into it, and he wants us to consider, are we willing to risk for the sake of the kingdom? Are we so compelled by Jesus that we will actually open ourselves up to rejection? Are we so convinced that he is the way, the truth, and the life that we will accept that there's going to be conflict that comes our way? Are we so confident that the kingdom truly is good news for the whole world, that we will hold on to hope when that conflict comes our way. We will keep believing that God is working for good, that somehow his kingdom can overcome, that somehow miraculous things can happen, that those we feel like a gap between or tension between with, that there might be some sense of like coming together under the love of Jesus. See, friends, Jesus declares to each of us that the kingdom is risky business, but he assures us that it's worth it. So we don't run away from that risk. We embrace it. We move into it. Because that's how to church. And then Jesus is going to pull this all together with one final word to his followers before he sends them out. He says, anyone who welcomes you welcomes me. Anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. In this last section, Jesus is actually speaking about the people that the disciples will encounter. And he's painting a picture. He's saying that yes, there will be some who reject you. There will be opposition from some in the world, but there will also be those who come around you. There will be a community that surrounds you. It's a beautiful image of people welcoming others into their lives. And then, there's nothing really fancy about it, right? Whoever welcomes you in and who just cares for you practically, gives you a cup of water, those people understand what the kingdom is all about. And Jesus says that as they welcome you, they welcome me. It's so simple. But how significant would this have been for those disciples as Jesus was sending them out on this challenging mission? He's telling them, I'm sending you out. It's going to be hard. You're going to face rejection. But I will provide for you by bringing people around you who will welcome you into their lives. Friends, this is fundamental to the Christian life. This is what we do. We look out for others. We take care of each other. We recognize that as we welcome others into our lives, we are welcoming Jesus himself in our midst. Hospitality and welcoming people into our lives is central to the life of the church. And in the midst of this pandemic, it feels like this is one of the hardest parts of church life to keep doing, isn't it? How do you welcome people in when we're supposed to be keeping our distance? It's hard. But it doesn't mean it's impossible. And let's be honest. The idea of welcoming people into our lives pre-pandemic, it wasn't exactly seamless. Maybe my perspective is skewed because I grew up in a small town, but it feels like we are trained as a society to keep our distance from other people. The difference is now is that when we're waiting in line for our groceries, there's 6 feet between us and the other people. But pre-pandemic, we were very content to stand close to those people, but not say a word to one another, right? When I lived in Toronto, I would get on the subway, and there would literally be like 3 other bodies like pressed against mine, right? We're all just jammed in. And on the entire streetcar, nobody says a word. Without a doubt, the pandemic has heightened the sense of disconnection, but it did not create it. See, our culture trains us to keep our distance, to keep to ourselves, to protect our personal space. But the heart of the church is human connection. It's opening up space for others to feel welcome. In the pandemic, it's made this more challenging, but that simply means that we need to be creative. Creative in the ways we connect. More creative in the ways we welcome others in. More creative in the ways that we take care of each other. But one thing we cannot do is we cannot lose sight of the importance of welcoming others into our lives. You see, and God's vision is that this hospitality would extend to the world, but it must start here. It must start with us, among the community of faith. We must learn what it means to join arms with other people who are part of this church, a part of this mission, a part of this kingdom. We need to welcome one another in. We need to become a beacon, a source of that kind of loving community so that others can be folded into the mix and experience it for themselves. We need each other. We need to help each other remember the story we're living in. We need to remind one another of our worth. We need to remind one another that God has us amidst the challenges we're facing. We need to remind each other that the cost of following Jesus is worth it. This is what we do. We create space in our lives so that we can welcome each other in and we can join God in the renewal of all things together. That is how to church. So to wrap this all up and to kind of bring it down in some practical, real-life experiences here at Lakeview, I'm going to invite a couple of my friends from my home church to kind of join me on stage. So Allie and Andrew are going to come on up. Give them a clap as they come. This is brave work coming up on stage. So it's a real treat for me to introduce these friends to you. Maybe some of you know them. They're part of our community. We just want to talk a little bit about how we've experienced some of these aspects of what we're talking about, what Jesus is talking about in our own home church context, which has been great. So Allie, how long have you been a part of our Lakeview community here?
I have been coming to church here for about 3 years, and I was a part of the home church for about a month prior to actually stepping into the building.
So yeah, home church was actually your segue into the whole thing,
Yeah.
which is cool. And then Andrew, how long you been hanging out at Lakeview?
Almost a year and a half now, and I guess I've been with home church for coming up on a year.
Yeah, cool. So Andrew, we talk about community, how it's such a significant part of the Christian life and a significant part of the home church experience. So just tell us a little bit about what you've experienced as you've joined our community, joined our home church. What does it look like for you just making those connections and experiencing those relationships?
Sure. It's important to note that I come as a non-Christian, and here I am on stage at Lakeview Church.
That's how we roll.
And I didn't know what you were speaking about today until the first service, and it's great because if you flip it, it applies to me as well. I was going into a situation after Alpha, I wanted to do more, but as a non-Christian, going into a home church, it was, am I going to be belittled? Is anyone going to be rude to me? Because you're all lovely folks and whatnot, but those kingdoms collide, as you said. But now I can say, after being with home church, half of my friend group is from home church or from church. There's never been any challenging moments within home church, given that I'm a non-Christian, but I'm invested in that group of people and what we achieve as a group together. So even being an outsider, being brought into that circle, it's been phenomenal. It's been really, really good.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you for sharing. It's been super fun to welcome Andrew to our community. He's an integral part of our community, which is awesome. And also to even show you this is what church is, right? And I know we talked about this as you were first kind of getting to know us and getting to know our community. I think it's fair to say you had a certain idea of what church looked like and what it was about.
Oh yeah. Because to go into home church, these aren't just Sunday Christians. This is Sunday and Wednesday night Christians. So it was a whole different group altogether.
Yeah, for sure. Well, even with it, I remember one of the first things that Andrew, one of the observations I remember saying to me, we were having a home church hangout where we weren't really doing all of our normal pieces of prayer and scripture. It was actually more of an intentional time to just be together and hang. We call it home chill, and just hang out together. And I remember we invited Andrew, and he's like, I thought you guys did all that church stuff on Wednesday. I was like, well, that's what we're doing. Oh, but we're just playing games, having a snack. It's and then I remember Andrew said, I'm starting to get the idea that community is a pretty big part of this whole church deal, which is yeah, that's absolutely it's so cool to have you experience that with us. So Allie, we're talking about how part of what we do as participants in the kingdom is we're learning to proclaim good news. And we're navigating the challenges. That's hard. It's not always received well. We don't always know what to say. So just tell us a little bit about your experience of trying to do that in some way in your life, but also how home church has supported you with that.
Yeah, so I'm a pretty loud person. I've got a big voice, but when it comes to my faith, I'm pretty tame and reserved. I tend to keep that to myself, mostly out of that fear of people applying that stereotypical Christian to me, like this woman's going to judge me and she's going to talk down to me, which despite having, established relationships with coworkers who don't see me that way, I was still nervous that they might start to look at me a little bit different. So one day I'd accidentally let it slip that I was going to home church on a Wednesday night, like, oh man. And they were like, oh, you go and sit in a room and talk about Jesus? Oh. I was like, it's a little bit more than that. We've got this pretty great connection and we support each other. And so after those experiences, I ran back to my home church and said like, oh, guys, they're asking me questions and I don't really know what to say to them. Because I felt like I needed to have, like you said, that big, grandiose discussion with them and show them all the wondrous things about God, but didn't really know how to do that. And so my home church was able to kind of guide me through those areas and just encourage me to share my own experiences within that. So yeah, it was wonderful.
Cool. Sorry about the mic there. Little mic drop moment, maybe. Yeah. No, I remember that being a really that was really fun for us as a community, even as you were sharing stories and as you're I love my coworkers and I want them to keep loving me. I'm afraid what this is going to kind of do to my relationship. And just the way that you leaned in on us, I think was really cool because it actually made us feel a little bit a part of that, and also to just remind you, you go, you're good, we got this. And there's always a safe place to come back and process as well, which I think, that's why we do home church so intentionally here at Lakeview, because we realize there's so much that can come from these Sunday gatherings, but there's so much more that needs to happen for the church to really be the church. We need to have room to gather and just be in each other's space, to just do life together, but also to gather and talk about how's it going as we're out there living out our lives and encountering, different experiences in the world. And so, we really believe that home church is important, and we're trying to continually move people into home church even in this challenging season. And so if you're out there and you're just saying, I would like to be a part of this, well, we would like you to know that we would like for you to be part as well. We have about 22 home churches that are gathering regularly, and if you would like to join in on one, we would like to help you make that connection. Or if you'd like to just try home church for a short season, we're offering something in October. We're calling them short burst home churches, where you can, for 4 weeks, get a feel for what it's like to be in a community of that sort and figure out if it's something you'd like to be a part of long term. So if you'd like to be a part of a short burst home church, you can easily register online, the same place where you sign up for your Sunday services. And if you'd like to hear more about how to join in on an ongoing home church, like the crew of ours that meets on Wednesday nights, somebody will be available to talk with you at the home church stand, as well as information online on our website where you can learn more and we can help you find your way into a home church this fall. Well, thank you so much, Allie and Andrew. Really appreciate you sharing. Can you give one more round of applause for them? It's so good. And I'm going to invite all of us to stand, and I'll close this with a word of prayer. God, I thank you for inviting us in on your mission, on the good work that you're doing in the world, proclaiming good news to those who need to hear it. I pray, God, that we would find ourselves surrounded in a community that has our back, that's encouraging us, that's strengthening us. And God, I pray that as we lean into those community, those relationships, that it would also give us a strength to face into whatever life throws our way. That we would be able to face opposition, face tension, knowing we're secure, knowing our value, knowing we are yours. And God, I pray that amidst all of the risk that we maybe face, that we feel as we commit ourselves to you, I pray that you'd help us to understand and remind one another that it's worth it, that you are leading us into the ways of life that are good, that you are trying to set things right in the world, and you just simply invite us to join you in that good work. So would we join you this week faithfully, we pray. Amen.